Back in 2018, here on Lights and Buttons, I started a video series called Finishing My Basement, where I talk about a variety of topics ranging from designing areas that will be finished versus unfinished so that you have additional storage when needed, all the way to the tech aspect of this room. For example, we talked about running Cat6 Ethernet cables behind the wall, running speaker wires behind the wall, as well as having the Ubiquiti wireless access point on the ceiling for proper Wi-Fi coverage. Now all that has happened, and since 2018, it's amazing that 4 years has passed now that we're in 2022, and some things changed, but other things have not. The reason why I haven't really touched on the home theater specifically in the series is because there are some things in flux. And what I mean by that was that there's some things that I planned to upgrade, but never really got around to because, life gets busy. All of a sudden, 4 years pass by and here we are. So with the home theater in its current state, I would like to show you the 10 things I've learned while building this out. Before we jump into the details, let's talk about the current setup. For a portion of this, I decided to go with the Andrew Jones line of speakers. The front and surround left and right speakers are comprised of the Pioneer SP FS52 floor standing speakers. And the center channel is the Pioneer SP-C22. I got these speakers on sale that was on top of a previous price reduction, so I figured for my first home theater, that's not bad of a start. Just in case if I didn't like them as much as I thought. But these turn out great. For the subwoofers, I decided to go with the big F12 subs. Those had some great reviews for its price point. The projector is a ViewSonic PJD7820 HD that outputs 1080p on a 120-inch screen. I'll be covering more about this setup later. To tie this all together, we have the Denon AVR-S 540BT receiver. Now this is a new one. Previously I had a used AVR-S 500BT that eventually malfunctioned, so I have replaced it with this current one. When you're setting up a home theater system, a lot of people will tell you that they highly recommend you to calibrate your system because each room is different, and rightfully so, right? You want to have the best audio performance for the specific room that you're in, and you don't want to just leave the things to the default settings and just cross your fingers and hope that it'll sound good. You want to make sure that it actually does sound good for your investment. So one of the things that you can adjust is the audio levels for each channel, and some home theater receivers will try to help you with that by giving you a microphone. And this is a microphone that has a long wire. You connect one end to the receiver, the other end you place at ear level in the primary seating position, and then this will listen to each channel and help the receiver calibrate each channel's audio levels. Now, with the two Denon receivers that I had, to be honest, this hasn't worked well for me. And what it does is it eventually turns down the rear channels way too much, as well as the subs, to the point where I'm asking, hey, is this thing working right? Because all I hear is like just the front speakers and maybe like the center channel, but the bass is way too low and the surround left and the surround right are almost non-existent. So for me personally, I'm not saying that this is not going to work for any receiver, but manually setting each channel's levels worked out the best. What's better than one subwoofer? Two subs. Now, we're not doing necessarily what you're thinking about. We're not trying to double the volume of the bass by adding in a second subwoofer, but we're trying to increase the quality of the bass that you're hearing. Now, let me expand on that. If you have one subwoofer and you're playing some music with consistent bass in it, and you walk around the room, take note of the bass levels as you're walking around. Sometimes you might hear the bass go up, and other times you might hear it go down. And especially the areas where you hear it go down, you don't want those to be areas where you just happen to be sitting in to listen to music. And sometimes, depending on the room, and each room is different, that can get pretty bad where it dips a lot in certain areas. And there's different things you can do. One of them is to add a second subwoofer that's located in a different part of the room, and that can fill in those dead spaces for the subwoofer. And how do you eliminate these dead spots, you might ask? Well, to do that, there's a procedure that you can follow called the subwoofer crawl test. And to do that, you take your subwoofer, you put it onto the couch where you primarily listen to sounds from. And in your primary seating position, the sub will be playing, and then you'll crawl around the room with the ear close to the floor, listening to the bass and what it sounds like from different points of the room. And the idea is that you're not moving the sub from place to place trying to test the sound, but you're placing it where you normally sit, and after the sound waves bounce off the walls and ceilings, and depending on the shape of your room and the furniture, you'll hear what the bass sounds like from each position. And then you can pick, okay, here's a position that might be good, but maybe it's in a doorway. And then you have a secondary position that you might pick because it's in a better spot that has a better bass response compared to its original location. So you can do different tests with that. And I guarantee you, if you have a spouse that never seen this before, they'll 100% think you're crazy. Now, I did a combination of the subwoofer crawl test as well as physically moving the sub around the room. And in the basement here specifically, I haven't found a better spot for the subs other than the front over here. I tried moving the sub to the middle of the room, the back of the room, and maybe the basement naturally is a better spot acoustically for the home theater, and maybe partly because it's a bigger room. This is shaped like an L where it expands out to the studio in the back, and then versus the first floor where it's a smaller room, and maybe, you know, shape-wise it has a lot more dead spots. And I think up in the first floor, having a second sub would be more beneficial than down here. But that's not to say that having two subwoofers is a waste of money for this particular setup. In this case, I think the benefit comes in where you can split the load so that you set each of the subwoofers to have volume, and then you can reduce the chances of distortions from extremely low rumbles or extremely loud sounds. Now, another thing I considered was having height speakers. So for example, if you're playing stuff with Dolby Atmos or DTS:X, this allows you to have sounds that appear to come overhead. So if, let's say, a helicopter is flying past you, you can hear it pass over you from the ceiling. And the way to accomplish this, there's a few ways of doing it. You can have a soundbar that has built-in Dolby Atmos capabilities where you have speakers that fire upwards and bounces off the ceiling and down to your ears. Or similarly, with tower speakers, you can buy an additional speaker that sits on top to do something similar. Or you can have ceilings or speakers that are built into the ceiling or attached to the ceiling and fires downwards for that effect. Now, it's pretty hard to accomplish that effect because I went to Best Buy, and I might get roasted for this, but went to Best Buy for a demo, and they were cramming a bunch of speakers on the ceiling. So maybe it's not the best way to position speakers, and they're just trying to demo as much as possible at once. But I didn't really get the sense of things coming over me from a sound point of view when I was watching the demo, and I wasn't really impressed with the setup. So I decided not to spend the money for a Dolby Atmos or DTS:X setup. In addition to that, not everything is compatible with Dolby Atmos or DTS:X, and that applies to both games and in movies. So you must have the source that supports it. You must have the receiver that also supports it, right? The receiver has to understand and be able to decode that. And then also, of course, the speaker setup as well. And for me, it wasn't really worth it after doing that research. It sounds cool in theory, but in reality, I think we're not quite there yet. So I decided to skip on that. Another thing that I learned was that soundproofing isn't really all that effective from how we have it set up. Now, I think other ways might work a little bit better, but I don't think there's a one size fits all for everyone. So the way we have it set up is along the ceiling, we do have fireproof insulation to help absorb some of these sounds. From what I read on the web, some people talked about adding double amount of drywall, sealing out the outlets. But if you have a door, for example, and even with the door closed, you can see the edges still have gaps, and especially with the bottom, the sound can pass through onto the other side. And it's not really super soundproofing. Even if you have everything else soundproof, the sound can still go through the door. As a matter of fact, I did an experiment where I set the home theater to maybe like a medium high level, not even like a ultra high level volume. And if you're playing an action movie, those low rumbles from the explosions, that will go right through the wall, right? You can hear it on the second floor, 2 floors up from the basement, and that rumbling sound from the sub, because that just passes right through the walls. So sorry neighbors, this is a townhouse. I'm sure they hear it too. Well, possibly another unpopular opinion. I think that 1080p with the DLP projector looks great. I don't really see the rainbow effect across the screen. Once in a while, maybe. Once in a while, as in like really rarely, maybe once every few months, I'll see the rainbow effect. And if you don't know what that is, look up DLP rainbow effect, and on Google it'll tell you a bunch of information about it. But for me, I think not having 4K is all right. Of course, having 4K would be even better, but even across a 120-inch screen, I think 1080p looks fine. For mounting the projector, a popular option is to mount it directly to the ceiling, which I did on the first floor back when I had my original setup. And I didn't like that because anyone walking on the second floor, or if the washer was going, which is on the second floor, I would notice that the vibrations translated to transferred to the projector, and the whole image would start shaking a little bit, just enough that I would notice, and I didn't like that. So for the basement setup, I decided to put it on a stand that's isolated from the ceiling. And there's probably better ways of doing it, and I know the stand looks ugly. And as a matter of fact, this wooden DIY thinger here underneath the projector, that's also a temporary measure along with the stand, and I just never got around to replacing it with something better. Oh, and probably the least favorite part of my home theater system is the fan noise from this projector. Now, if I'm quiet, you can probably hear it from the lav mic. Hopefully you can hear it. But this is pretty loud in my opinion, and especially because it's behind you, it kind of ruins the audio a little bit. And when I was talking to one of my friends, he said that because this is a portable projector, it's a smaller case, which means that it has a smaller fan, and that fan has to work harder, it has to spin faster to cool the unit down because these generate a lot of heat, right? So having a larger dedicated home theater projector can cut down on the noise because you buy a bigger unit, you have a bigger fan, it spins slower, which means less noise. So when you're watching a movie and there's a quiet scene, you don't hear this thing blaring in the background. So lessons learned, I guess. I am considering replacing my projector with a new one, and there's a couple of ways I can go about it. The first one is to stick with the same type. So this is a traditional long throw projector, meaning that it sits in the back of the room, projects across the room onto the screen that's in front of the room, and that's the traditional projector that everyone thinks about. There's another type of projector called an ultra short throw projector, abbreviated UST, that sits in the front of the room and then projects onto the screen only from a few inches away. And that's pretty cool. And I thought about that and did some research, and it's not without its drawbacks, right? So it's cool that it's very close to your entertainment center, right? It's close to your PS5 or whatever you have playing, and it's conveniently located up front. If someone gets up in the middle of the room, they don't have to be blinded by the projector, and they don't cause a shadow. But the thing is that it's costly, right? So the traditional long throw projectors will cost less than a short throw projector. And then also from what I've read, and I have to verify this, the ultra short throw projector might need a different type of screen. So these traditional screens might not be the best for ultra short throw projectors, because as soon as you put your ultra short throw projector here and you shine it against the screen, the light will bounce off. A lot of it will bounce off into the ceiling and not towards your eyes, which is where you want them to be. And you might have to buy a special type of screen, like an ambient light rejection screen, like an ALR screen, that will allow the light to be redirected to you in a proper way. And that will add yet another cost to the equation. And another thing besides the cost is the placement, right? So you have to be a few inches away from the screen in the middle, and guess what's located in the middle of the screen? The center channel. And this is a very important part of the home theater experience, because if you're watching a movie, the dialogues are coming out from the center channel, and you don't want to really mess with that, right? So some people put the projector on top of the center channel, which I guess you could do, but in this case, the Pioneer speakers that I have, these Andrew Jones series, are kind of curved, so it's hard to do that. But some people get creative with it. Another option is that you can mount it on the wall or ceiling above it and kind of, flip it upside down. But then I think a lot of these stands are specific to the projector, so you have to make sure that you have what you need to order it. I don't think you can necessarily order a generic stand. Maybe you can, I'm not sure, I have to do some research on that, but I found that the few stands that I found that mounts to the wall for the ultra short throw projectors are specific to certain models. So you got the cost, you got the physical layout, all kinds of factors that you have to take into considerations when selecting a projector. Lighting is very important in a home theater, and I'm not just talking about having fancy RGB lights that will change color on command. I'm talking about light that's coming in through your window, aka ambient light or sunlight that can affect your screen. Now, just a little bit of sunlight can affect your image because on a cloudy day, and I'll give you an example, this window is facing east, and on an afternoon where the sun is on the other side of the house, the light that's coming in just a little bit from the window is actually washing out all the colors from the screen, as you can see. So once I go up to the window and I shut the shade a little bit more, as much as I can, you can see the colors return back to normal. So that's how much a little bit of ambient light can affect your screen if you don't have one of those special ALR, the ambient light rejection screen. This is just a traditional white screen that is in my home theater. And then finally, last but not least, also related to lighting, is that you don't have to go with a Philips Hue lighting setup. If you wanted something that's simpler and cheaper, there is an option for that, and possibly more secure as well. For example, if you're going for a Philips Hue, you get all the bells and whistles, you get the internet connectivity, mobile app integration, you get the RGB lighting, rope lighting, you can program it, automate it. But if you don't need all that, you can go with something like a Lutron controller, and all you need is dimmable bulbs that's compatible with it, right? So if you have bulbs that can be dimmed, you can get a wireless Lutron controller. As a matter of fact, one of my other rooms has this, and it's very nice. I use the controller pretty much every day, and the remote control uses a button cell battery that lasts for years, so you don't have to worry about batteries dying that often. And it's also more secure in some ways because, well, it's not connected to the web versus a Hue bridge that is connected to the web, and you have to worry about updating it, and maybe like once a year or a couple times a year it glitches out. And also if there's a power outage, because with Hue you have to leave all the lights on even when it's off. You turn it off from the controller. If there's a power outage like a brownout or a blackout, your lights turn on, but with the Lutron setup, it doesn't do that. So consider maybe other alternatives to Hue lights if you want a simpler and a more secure setup that's not as fancy, but just does the job where it dims the light when or turns off the light when you're watching a movie, and then you can turn back on remotely if you're walking around. So purely from a cost perspective, if you went down the Philips Hue route, you would first have to buy the Hue bridge, which allows the bulbs to communicate with each other with a protocol called Zigbee. And then on top of that, if you want to buy additional bulbs that's not included in the base package, if you want the RGB functionality, that's $60 per bulb. And if you want these rope lighting, that's closer to probably $80 or $90 each. And if you don't want to control everything through a mobile app and you want to use a physical smart switch to control your lights, that's yet an additional cost on top of that, and it adds up pretty quickly. Versus if you went with something like a Lutron setup that has a dimmer that replaces the wall switch and it comes with a remote control, that's all like $70 in one package, and all you have to do is to make sure that your bulbs are compatible with the dimmer, assuming that you're using LEDs, and if your LED bulbs are not, then you just replace them with LED bulbs that are dimmable. So those are the 10 things that I learned from building this home theater behind me. Thanks for watching, and I'm happy to announce that this concludes the Finishing My Basement series here on Lights and Buttons. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe as always, and I'll see you in the next video.